If I grow up. Who was that? Precious asked when I returned to the bench where she was talking to Terrell. Her eyes widened when we told her. You disciples? Not yet, Terrell answered. Even in the sun, the cold gradually seeped through your clothes. Precious shivered and hugged herself. You want to come to my place and watch TV? It was tempting. Neither Terrell nor I had ever been invited into a girl's home before. Maybe another time, I said. Terrell scowled at me, and I nodded toward Marcus's car. The corners of my friend's mouth turned down. Precious's pretty lips pursed. See you later. She started across the yard toward her building. Terrell and I rode around the yard, always keeping Marcus's car in sight. I asked him how Lakita was, and he said she cried all night. Jamar stay with her? I asked. Terrell shook his head. He got off his bike and started sliding around on a frozen pond, leaving white scratches in the dirty brownish ice. If I grow up, I'm going to have a ride like Marcus's, he said through chattering teeth. He must have been freezing wearing only that hoodie and chains and bling like you wouldn't believe. You know, Rance got a solid gold chain that weighs 5 pounds. How do you know that? I asked. Rance Jones was the leader of the Gentry Gangstas. I'd never seen him, and I was pretty sure Terrell hadn't either. I heard from someone, Terrell said, and he got a 25-carat diamond pinky ring. Them gangstas use kids 9, 10 years old. Maybe you should join them gangstas, I joked. Terrell gave me a sour look. Marcus is my first cousin. He should let me join the disciples. And get jumped in? I asked. To prove you'd be loyal to the group, you had to let yourself be beaten up and burned with cigarettes. Sherelle shrugged. Everybody else been through it. On Abernathy Avenue, a police cruiser stopped behind Marcus's car. The window went down and Officer Patterson wagged a thick brown finger at us. He was the only person I'd ever heard of who'd grown up in Frederick Douglass and become a cop. I slipped off the bench and went to see what he wanted. How you doing, Deshawn? He asked. He had a round face and a thick, bushy mustache. Growing up, he'd known my mother, and he always said hello when he saw me. Okay, I leaned in the open window. The car smelled like coffee. A shotgun and a computer were mounted next to the driver's seat. Officer Patterson nodded at the Mercedes. Marcus was that little boy's uncle, right? Yes, sir. Give him my condolences, okay? What's that? Tell him I'm sorry about his nephew. Yes, sir. Officer Patterson took a sip of coffee from a paper cup and brushed his mustache with the back of his hand. Gonna join the disciples someday? No, sir. Gonna stay in school and out of trouble. Good boy. Officer Patterson reached over and patted me on the shoulder. Then he drove off. I went back to the bench. What do you talk to him for? Terrell asked. He knew my mama. We huddled on the bench, shivering. The 3 identical buildings in the Frederick Douglass project loomed up like dirty tombstones. Half the windows were boarded over with wood. The grounds around the buildings were either cracked concrete walks covered with broken glass or hand-packed bare brown dirt with a few trees and some dead brown weeds. Benches lined the walks, but they were mostly broken. Same with the playground. There were no swings on the swing set, just rusty chains hanging down from the top. The seesaw was gone. What little sand was left in the sandbox was the color of dark smoke. Only the rusty monkey bars remained. As shorties, we used to play on them for hours and then go home with burnt red palms. We waited until Marcus came back. Then, shivering cold, we hurried inside. The lobby was lit by one long, flickering bulb. The mailboxes in the wall had all been busted open by drug fiends looking for welfare checks. The walls were covered with colorful, loopy graffiti and the backslashes of disciples' tags. Here and there, someone had hung a small Christmas wreath or a bunch of holly outside a door. The elevator was broken, as usual, so we carried our bikes up the stairs. Some floors smelled of cooking, others smelled of weed. On some floors you heard loud TV, on others rap and hip-hop, and always in the winter the banging of the heat pipes day and night, like a prison gang eternally busting rocks. Taped on the wall of each landing was a blue sheet of paper saying that Darnell's funeral would be at 1 p.m. on Saturday at the First Baptist Church. Leaving my bike in my apartment, I helped Terrell carry his upstairs. The door to the Blake's apartment was open, and inside it was hot and crowded with grown-ups, even though it was the dead of winter. The windows were partway open, and women sat fanning themselves. The few men, there were always way fewer men than women, dabbed their foreheads with handkerchiefs. On a table in the middle of the living room were plates of food and vases of flowers. It was getting toward the end of the month, and for a lot of people, food was running low. That was especially true around Christmas, when there were presents to buy. The sight and smell of those heaping plates made my stomach growl. Terrell's cousin, Lakita, Darnell's mother, was sitting in the middle of the couch wearing an old yellow house dress and clutching a tissue. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying. Terrell's mother, Mrs. Blake, sat on one side of her, and his Aunt Rosa sat on the other. Other than Marcus, I'd never heard that Lakita had any other family. When Mrs. Blake saw her son, she opened her arms wide. Terrell hesitated and glanced around, as if embarrassed to be treated like a little boy, but then he stepped forward and let her hug him. "Terrell," she said in a sad voice, "you're the only good man that's left." She was looking over Terrell's shoulder at Jamar when she said that. Lakita's boyfriend sat with his elbows on his knees and his head hanging, a tear tattoo beside each eye. He was tall and rangy, with hair split into cornrows. In his left ear was a big diamond stud, and his hands were covered with gold rings and tattoos. He raised his head and blinked hard, as if trying to squeeze out tears that weren't there. "If only I hadn't left him alone," he said woefully. People heard him, but no one said anything. Page 17. Shooting. During the day, the cops and housing police came around, but as soon as it got dark, they were gone. Sometimes gangbangers shot at cops at night or dropped broken TVs on patrol cars or threw bottles out the windows at them. If Grandma had her way, I'd be a houseboy, allowed outside only to walk to and from school. That night, Grandma watched Sanford and Son and laughed so hard she had to take the tissue out of her sleeve and dab her eyes. "How can you laugh like that?" I asked. "You've seen this episode 100 times. "Something got to make me laugh," Grandma said, still jiggling. "After what happened to that little boy." Pop, pop, pop. Outside they started shooting. It sounded more like cap guns than the big bangs you heard on the TV. Next thing I knew, Grandma was on the floor next to me, and I smelled her perfume. She raised her head alertly. "Where's Nia?" she asked, even though we both knew she was with her boyfriend, LaRue. Pop, pop, pop. Crash. More shots, and somewhere nearby a window shattered. Bang! A door slammed downstairs, and we heard rapid steps coming up. A key jiggled in the lock, and Nia rushed in. My sister was 14 and had long, straight brown hair and almost always a smile. She was breathing hard, and her face was flushed from running, but her eyes gleamed with excitement. Grandma propped herself up on her elbows. "Get down," she commanded. Still gasping for breath, Nia dropped to one knee. "You're gonna get yourself killed someday," Grandma muttered, even as she relaxed, knowing that Nia was safe. "Those boys shoot all the time," Nia scoffed. "You forget how your mama died?" Grandma snapped. "How many times I have to tell you not to run when they shoot? You could run right into that crossfire. You hear shooting, you drop to the ground and stay there." "And get my clothes all dirty?" My sister shook her head. The shooting stopped, the TV was still on, and Red Fox's gravelly voice in the laugh track lured Grandma back to the couch. Nia flopped down and put her arms around Grandma's neck and hugged her. "Deshawn," my sister said, "turn the channel to BET." "Hey!" Grandma started to protest. "Oh, come on," Nia said with a laugh. "You've seen Sanford and Son so many times you know it by heart. I grinned at Grandma. Told you. You two are too smart for your own good, she grumbled. Pop, pop, pop. The shooting started again, but now it sounded far away. Grandma stiffened, but then looked at Nia and me and relaxed. We were safe, at least for tonight. Weapons. Page 20. Grandma's apartment had one bedroom with one bed, which she and Nia shared. I slept on the living room couch. On most mornings, Grandma left to clean houses before we woke up. After breakfast, Nia and I washed the dishes and put them in the rack to dry. On TV, people had kitchens with dishwashers and bathrooms with showers, but all we had were sinks and a bathtub. Sometimes I'd go into the bathroom and find Grandma on her knees washing clothes in the tub. There'd once been washing machines in the basement of our building, but they'd been broken so often the city took them out. Outside, Terrell and Lightbulb were waiting for me in the yard. In the spot where Darnell fell, someone had stuck a small wooden cross in the dirt with candles and bunches of flowers around it. The yellow crime scene tape lay twisted and trampled on the ground. The three of us stared at the cross without speaking. Then Lightbulb said, "You got that Snickers bar?" I gave it to him, and he tore it open while we walked to school. Terrell turned the bill of his cap to the right and stuck in his gold earring. Ahead of us, Nia and her boyfriend LaRue waited on the sidewalk. They were in 8th grade. LaRue was slim, with light chocolate skin and almond-shaped eyes, as if he had some Asian blood. His thick black hair was long, with lots of loose dreadlocks. The bill of his cap was turned to the right, and a black bandana poked out of his back pocket. "Terrell," he called, "come here." My best friend practically bounded over. He didn't have those cool, slow moves yet like the older guys. He and LaRue went behind some parked cars. When they came back, Terrell was arranging the front of his hoodie. "What did he give you?" I asked when we started walking again. Terrell told Lightbulb to get lost. Our friend hunched his shoulders like his feelings were hurt, then went off. Terrell opened the pocket of his hoodie, just enough for me to see the gray handle of a box cutter inside. "Are you whack?" I hissed. "I'm going to take it inside and give it back to him," Terrell said. "They find it, you'll get expelled," I said. "And what do you think LaRue's going to do with it in school?" Terrell shrugged as if he didn't care. "All I know is he said he'd put in a good word for me to Marcus." He took out his asthma inhaler. He seemed to need it whenever he got nervous or excited. Lightbulb joined us again, and we continued to school. Washington Carver was on the border between Frederick Douglass and the Gentry Street project. To the school's builders, that must have made sense, because kids from both projects could go to it. But the location also put the school in the middle of the war zone between the disciples and the gangstas. Like a jail, our school had metal bars on all the doors and windows and a tall metal fence that circled the grounds. The 6th graders went in a different entrance than the 7th and 8th graders, whose bags were scanned and bodies were sometimes searched. The 6th graders were rarely searched. At the 6th grade entrance stood Ms. Rodriguez, the assistant principal, as ancient as the history in our history books. Her short hair was completely white, and she was all